Hi, everybody. I'm Tina Brock. It's 5 o'clock and that dinner bell has chimed, and you are here for a virtually existential dinner conversation. Every Saturday at 5, we gather around the table and we talk to some of our favorite artists and people that are creating and doing exciting things in the community. And we have the conversations that we want to have all throughout the year, but we just can't because we're usually on stage. And so now we can do that. And so I hope you'll join us at 5 o'clock every Saturday here in the Zoom room or come in on Facebook Live and put your questions in the chat box for our guest today, Jenna Kuerzi. I am joining you virtually from Edinburgh, which is where we're going to talk. We're going to spend some of the conversation anyway, talking about Jenna's show that she took to Edinburgh back in 2019. She is, Jenna Kuerzi, a Renaissance woman. She is a performer, she's a singer, she is a writer, she's a producer, she is a woman of fabulous hair and many, many, many great, wonderful talents. And I thought she would make a wonderful conversation today. So we want to talk about her work on Johnny Depp, retrospective on late-stage capitalism that she took to Edinburgh in 2019, and the performance, the solo performance shows that she's done with her friend and partner, Val Dunn, and her recent diagnosis with type 1 diabetes and what that means as a performer. So let us send a big red-haired welcome to Jenna Kuerzi. Welcome to Into the Absurd.
Hi, thanks.
Hey.
What a strange place to be.
Well, I don't know. I think the hair has got to be a signature piece for you. I know as a casting person and as a producing artistic director, it certainly suits you. So we'll talk about hair later, though. Let's go back for our audience and start as far back as you want to go, when you were a child, or just I'm interested to know when you decided that, I'm going to go to school and I'm going to study this, and that's what I'm going to do. Yeah.
Great. So when I was a kid, again, kind of like you said, I've always been interested in a million different things. So what I wanted to be when I grew up was always different. But I wanted to be a basketball star for a very long amount of time because I was an athlete when I was a kid, which kind of follows through to my life now because I'm extremely competitive and I can't share that all the time. But I was an athlete, so I wanted to be a basketball star, and then I wanted to be a vet, and then I wanted to be an astronaut. But I always wanted to be a singer or a rock star or something because my grandfather went to school for theater, and he was a singer, and he would pull me up on stage all the time to sing Disney songs that I was obsessed with. And he just kind of like pushed me in that direction, I guess. And then when I got into high school, I did a summer theater camp. I did Titanic the musical, was my ever show. Nice little easy listening for seventh grade.
How old were you? Seventh grade, yeah.
Yeah, and I was completely hooked. I loved the people that I met. It was just like this small little theater camp in South Jersey. And I did that until I couldn't anymore. When I graduated from high school, I did all the high school musicals. And I was like, you know what? I think that I wanted to be all these different things, but I can be all of those things if I'm an actor. So I'm going to do that.
And it makes perfect sense. And also just the kinds of aspects of your personality that would guide you to these things, the adventurousness of an astronaut and the sort of competitiveness of sports, and I love the fact that I think having worked in sports or been on teams is a really interesting aspect. I always feel like, in the room when people have worked on team sports together and when they sort of have that, that kind of a sort of
like
orientation to it, right?
Yeah.
You're working it together.
I think that's why I'm like drawn towards devised work and also like creating with a team and a production as opposed to just kind of like doing whatever.
Well, let's go there. I mean, I'm really interested in the work that you've done on, the fascination with the Johnny Depp show. I guess a question about working on scripted works versus working on a solo show or your own work. Can you just articulate the things that make that so satisfying for you, working on solo devised?
Yeah, I think it's nice because, I mean, I always say this with Shakespeare because I feel like Shakespeare and devised work kind of go hand in hand a little bit. Because with Shakespeare, you're not comparing yourself to anybody because somebody more famous than you already did that part. They did it, 5 million times, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have done that part. You're never going to do it like them. So, like, take that pressure off of yourself and just go and just do it that you would. And I feel like devised work also has that same kernel of like your own truth that you can just follow. And you don't have to compare it to anybody else. Like, my Johnny Depp impression is not great, but it doesn't really matter because I'm just doing my own version of Johnny Depp in a show that like I have full control over because it's also mostly just me on stage, like solo-ish show because Val Dunn is involved, but she's more so playing a voice of reason character. But I can just push along the show however I see. I can shift it based on who's in the audience or where I am. So a show in Scotland is different than a show in Fergie's, is different than a show in Val's living room, and there's something just really beautiful and fun and like sharp as a performer where I have to stay ahead of myself and ahead of them because I know where it's going, but it could completely go somewhere else.
Right. So how much of the show, if you're doing it in the living room versus you're in Fergie's, which I imagine, you have all that wonderful ambiance of people there having a drink, they're just with you. And that's a sort of a different challenge than, right, you're like a foot away from somebody in somebody's living room and you can see all of their expression and whatnot. Do you find that there's a preferred like number of people in the audience or a preferred like a living room show is more exciting for you than being in Fergie's?
Yeah, Fergie's was kind of awesome because the ambiance of like we're gathered in a bar, it's a public space, and like that's Johnny Depp's favorite public space, presumably. So the living room was like an interesting experiment because that was just we had no money, so we did it in Val's living room the first time. We lit a bunch of candles, which was cool, and so that was interesting. But I think Fergie's has that like vibe of I can see all of you still, but it feels more like attack me as a performer because we're all in a collective space and not a house. Back, like it was such a weird in Scotland, it was a back conference room in Newtown, in like you had to pass through a patio to get to this unair conditioned room where the windows are like boarded up with styrofoam. It was really hot and there was a fan and an air conditioning unit that was leaking all over the floor, and we had to be in and out in 10 minutes, and there was like weird chairs because it was a conference room. And now that we've gone and we've learned a lot, we were like, oh, this needs to happen in a bar. People are way more interested in participating, and you can just open the door and they're already there, as opposed to like, hey, come to our weird back conference room where we're throw shit in the dark.
So how do you go about finding, I mean, is that, or I would guess those are pretty valued spaces though, right? If you're going to go to try to find a space in a bar, and I would imagine with the amount of people performing, they're probably gone pretty quickly, aren't they?
Yeah, for the free fringe, which is what we participated in, which has all the benefits of regular fringe, except you're not losing thousands of dollars because the registration fee is not as exorbitant as the other festivals. So what they do is the earlier you get your application in, the more pick of venues and times you get. We dragged our butts and like didn't turn in our application until really late because the show we were still like, we don't know what we're doing. So we thought that this would be a good decision, doing a 3 p.m. in like a fancy 4-star boutique hotel. But if we had gotten it in earlier, now knowing, having been there, I know what the venues are that are like the hot tickets and that you got early. And if you want a 6 o'clock show, you need to get your application in the day of. Yeah.
But so you learned that, right? I mean, these are the things that you guys picked up in 2019 when you were there. And am I right in that you were hoping to go back in 2020 and then you'll try to take it back in 2021? And these are changes I assume you'll try to go for. Will you change the show at all? Did you?
Yeah. The show shifts every once in a while. So from Val's living room, it was still kind of like just a retrospective throughout his entire career, because the game of the show is we're going to follow Johnny Depp's illustrious career, because he was a preteen spousal abuse or preteen heartthrob turned one forever, and we're going to follow his career through all 91 of his illustrious film, television, and video game voiceover appearances. Anytime you've seen one of those appearances, you throw a gold doubloon at me on the stage, and whoever, like Johnny Depp, has recklessly thrown the most amount of gold at the altar of Johnny Depp, you get a prize at the end. But he does keep making movies, so we're going to keep having to add movies, and all this new information comes out about his personal life and things that he may or may not have done. So
is that going to be a new chapter, all that's happening right now with?
Yeah, this libel case has to be involved in some way. We do touch on it because there's a whole section in the show where we go through we get to Crimes of Grindelwald, and then we go through the actual crimes of Johnny Depp, as opposed to just that movie being terrible. So it's like, his tip of his finger got cut off, and he wrote in blood all over a hotel room, and him and Amber Heard were illegally importing dogs in Australia. So the list keeps getting bigger as to that part of the show. We did do some rewrites for the first time we did Fergie's, which was last year, because Fergie is an amazing patron of the arts and was just like, you can take my space, your show sounds insane. So we rewrote a lot of stuff then. And then Val has been out of town, so we on and off work on it. But for the most part, we try to keep it true to what that rewrite was until we can actually sit down and kind of sharpen things and make it more pointed.
Is it in your head? Is there actually a written script that you work off of and that you rehearsed, or do you just rehearse sections of it and it's largely improvisational, or how does that work?
So a lot of it is half of it is improvisational, but we do have a script that we worked on. How much of that I remember any given day is always questionable, but Val will often be like, oh, you got that one right today. That was great. Because there's a whole monologue about Crybaby that I sometimes paraphrase, and sometimes it's word perfect. But it's mostly scripted. And now, having done it in 4 different productions, I know generally what people are going to respond to more, and I can kind of riff off of that. So a lot of the funnier things are jokes that came up in performance that I then put to memory and can spout off in a different production. But there's a script, which is hilarious because it's the only show, it's Val's only produced show. So she sends it out as submissions for festivals, and it's just when you're reading it, you're like, what is this?
Yeah, I mean, it does. I don't know. I think it has all the bells and whistles to it. When you were starting to think about, I'm going to do a solo show, is he somebody you've been fascinated with before, or was it just he's got just such a rich life that it felt like I have to do this? I mean, were there other celebrities considered?
No, it was always trying to. So the kernel of it was, I mean, I've been obsessed with him since I was a kid. He was one of the first people that I was like, oh, what a weirdo. I really want to do that sort of work. And then we see how that turns out. But Val and I were brainstorming because we really wanted to work together. We've been friends for a while, and we were like, I want to work with you. I think you're so interesting and extremely talented. And we had done a 24-hour play festival where she had written a monologue for me as a hurricane. And so I was a hurricane for a piece of hers. And we sat down one day and we were like, what do we have in common that we love? And we went through a list and we were like, okay, well, I really like, ritual. And I think that games in theater is interesting. Oh, and I really like Johnny Depp. And she was like, wait a minute, you really like Johnny Depp? I really like Johnny Depp. And it turns out we both dressed up as Jack Sparrow for Halloween when we were in high school and middle school. So we were like, let's do a retrospective. And then Val said, let's do a retrospective on late-stage capitalism. And so we just kind of did that, and there were these pictures, they're so cute, of like me as Jack Sparrow and Val as Jack Sparrow with like all these drawn on goatees and stuff, and my costume has not gotten better.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the charm of it, right? That it's
Yeah.
just so. I want to jump for a second to, or maybe more than a second, to you're up in New York last year, and you're doing what a lot of people were doing is, and you're auditioning, and then sort of all things come to a bit of a halt. And one of how this ties to this next thing I'm going to ask you, I'm not really sure, except for I think it was in a frame of the same conversation we were having about how you get called a lot, or have had many calls to play Janis Joplin up on Broadway and in New York. And I tell us a little about how that experience, those experiences, or sort of what the result of that was.
Sure. Yeah, I went up and down for one night with Janis Joplin, which was, it's a solo-ish, again, show about Janis. And I went back and forth, and I was doing the grind, and they basically told me in not so layman terms, I guess, they were just like, you are very small and you will not fit into these costumes, but you're great. And we really enjoy your energy. Much like Janis Joplin. So see you later. And
right. Yeah.
back and forth.
But it's multiple times, right? In different theaters, different productions. And that was your first audition to play her, was when you were pretty young.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you were right out of school, right?
Yeah. I was, so when I had graduated from Rowan University in Glassboro, I had kind of like hodgepodged a musical theater major. So my full degree is like acting, directing, and musical theater. So I was like, I'm just doing musical theater after this. I only did 2 musicals when I was in school, and I want to do more. So I was up in New York a lot, and I auditioned for Fun Home at the Public, and I had gotten pretty far in that process. And then Janis Joplin was kind of like the next EPA that I had gone to, and nobody was there. So I was just like a little non-union actor, like sitting in the waiting room with 4 other older women who had guitars, just like scrolting Joplin. But I knew, I was like, this is a specialized call, and I'm not going to have to wait all day, and I'm going to get seen, because not everybody can do this, and I know I can. So yeah, I was doing the New York thing not for a long time, because I was still working in Philadelphia after I graduated with some smaller companies. But I was back and forth like 4 times a week, I'd say. And then I was doing that again in February. And then this all kind of went away.
Happened. Mm-hmm. What is a really, I don't know, what's a memorable role that you've played on stage here or around the country, and that just that you would do again in a heartbeat, and you just felt like it expressed all the multitude of aspects of yourself?
Yeah, that's kind of hard, because I do so many things. But I did Sunday in the Park with George 2 years ago, and I got to do Dot and Marie, and that show is just so gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
And I would do it again in a heartbeat, because I found a lot of things with her, but I think there's so much more too that I could, like, in a production that like really helps that part kind of breathe and grow.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I could do something special.
Mm-hmm.
And Sondheim, I have a very like soft spot in my heart, because he doesn't just write like musical theater songs for musical theater performers. It's all got something else in there. It's Shakespeare, and it's complicated. It's beautiful music, and then it's real people who just happen to be singing.
Mm-hmm.
Marie, in particular, in that show, Dot and George's older daughter, is really Children at Art's like a gorgeous song that I would like to do more.
I remember you talking about being in that show at the time, and how transcendent for lack of a better word, it felt. And I think, you know, that's one of the things I think that is so extraordinary about your work is that you do have the ability to sort of really electrify is too strong a word. I think it's apt, certainly, of the work that you do, but transcend is probably a better word, and that is that you get, you know, you get through that and beyond, and it becomes something much larger than. Let's on your resume, you have so red hair, variable, and is that because you do it yourself and it changes, or do you change it for different roles? Or I mean, are you a redhead? I mean,
I'm not.
well, neither am I.
Here,
I can't imagine you being anything but red. When did you decide on red, and how has that?
I was a senior in high school. I always wanted red hair. I was obsessed with red hair because it's awesome. I mean, you feel it too, right? You're like, this is just, what else would I have been? Senior year of high school, I was like, hey, I'm playing Babe Williams in pajama game. Can I dye my hair red for the part? And they were like, yeah, totally. And then it's been what, 16?
Yeah.
But I would dye it. And I always say that because people are so not imaginative. So like they won't cast you based on what you walk into a room with. And I'm like, I don't have to have my hair like this. That's more so for film work where I'm like, I can dye my hair anything you want. Like,
do you have to downplay it? Do you feel like you have to think about that before you go in a room? Like, I mean, certainly for certain roles, yeah, you'd want to pull it one way or the other, but do you ever consciously think, I really need to like back this truck up and you know, and take the heat off my hair?
Yeah, that's funny, right? Not really, because I also know that I'm like, oh, I have a mop of giant red hair. Like that is a very distinct thing that if I'm walking down the street, somebody goes, oh, well, there's Jenna. And I appreciate that. And it definitely set me in a different category than other like my peers that I would be going up against to get a role. But often I do think that like, what if I just had my natural hair color? What if I was just like that brown hair girl that sings stuff, you know? But I purposefully kind of steered my career in a different direction, and it started with my hair, which sounds so crazy to say out loud, but
No, I don't think, I mean, you know, it makes perfect sense. It's such an expression, you know, of, like you say, it's the first thing you see. You have, it's, you know, it's the first thing we respond to. And it's certainly indicative, I think, of your personality on so many levels. Something else you wrote in your resume is that you do a transatlantic accent. And what is a transatlantic accent? I thought of like, I don't know. I was thinking
well,
of,
like, you know, like Katharine Hepburn and all those people.
okay, I should know this. I confess. Okay. Do you get called on to do that very often? The transatlantic?
No, not at all. Which is kind of funny because I sound like me, and I was like, oh, well, if I was a casting person and I heard me speak, I'd be like, oh, can't you do like some old timey stuff? That would be right. But no, asked me to do that.
You have also listed on your, it's under, gosh, what is it under? Well, it's at the bottom of the resume under skills, I think it is, your type 1 diabetes diagnosis. And I thought about it, and, you know, we've talked about this before, that sure, there are commercials and certainly avenues where you would be, where that knowledge would be important. I guess I want to talk just a little bit about when you were diagnosed and how that has affected the way you live. I mean, how you manage that.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. Like now it's kind of, I feel like I downplay it a lot because it's just become part of what I deal with every day. So I don't, like when people are like, oh, that must be so difficult. I'm like, yeah, it is. But, you know, I'm not going to make that big of a deal of it when it's kind of a big deal. I was diagnosed 2 years ago. It was 2 years in June. And they thought it was type 2 for a long time, which is very different. They're actually completely different diseases, but they're kind of lumped together because they both deal with glucose in your blood. So they thought it was type 2. they were treating me for that. Turns out that wasn't it. It was type 1. Type 1, you have to manage with multiple daily injections of insulin, and which can be difficult if you're on stage and you're running high or low, because if you're high, you're super thirsty, you're super tired, and you just kind of like push through it. But if you're low, that's an immediate, like that needs to be treated immediately, or you can pass out or go into a coma. And I've only been low on stage once since I've been diagnosed, and it was during Snow Queen at the Arden. But luckily I was like about to exit stage, so I just like ran off stage and ate a handful of Skittles, and then I was good to go for the rest of the show. But it is, you know, a 24/7, 365-day disease. It doesn't take any days off. It doesn't take any moments off. And I'm constantly, I wear a medical device in my arm. It's called a Dexcom, and it goes directly to your phone. So right now I'm not doing too good, but it tells me 24/7 what's going on inside my body, which as an actor, I think has kind of helped me like become more in tune with whatever I need to be doing at that moment. And at the Arden, they were so sweet too. There was a summer scene, and like normally you would never see this, and that's like the only visible thing for this disability, which I guess is like, you know, lucky. Like, but I had a summer costume and I was wearing a bathing suit, and they gave me these little swimmies to put over.
That's a great solution.
It was so adorable.
What did you feel when you knew you were, was it you got faint, or was it?
Yeah, so if you're low, you start to like, you're super thirsty and like sweating profusely, and it's like everything in your body's kind of just like shaking. And I'm sure people have felt low blood sugar symptoms before, because it's just like a lightheaded rush and you just like, you feel kind of drunk. So I know like when I feel it, I'm like, oh no, I need to eat something or like get some sugar into my body. But it was interesting because at first with Snow Queen, I was like, oh, I don't care if this shows or not, because I'm sure there's little kids in the audience that like also may have diabetes.
Yeah.
But then I thought about it and I was like, swimmies are great. Like, what a great costume choice.
Yeah, that's a special solution, I think. Do you think that there's, you had no symptoms before you were diagnosed?
Yeah.
Right? Nothing, it was just a routine.
Blood work, yeah. Like, oh, you need to go to an endocrinologist immediately. And I was like, I don't know what an endocrinologist is. And yeah, so that was like a full like 6 months. And I was in the middle of doing a show at the time as well that like wasn't a great experience, but I was still like showing up to rehearsal like weeping because I spent the day at the doctor's office, or, you know, I was still trying to deal with the fact that I can eat that thing, but maybe I shouldn't because of the long-term consequences and the thought that I have to put into it, or like, yeah, that's been interesting shifting.
Yeah, of your just whole diet and your daily, your daily taking care of yourself. I thought it was interesting the comment about sort of tuning into your body. You seem to me to be a person that is firing on pretty, you know, a lot of cylinders a lot of the time, which is what makes it's so much fun to watch you, because you're emanating a lot of energy. And I imagine that like to be also juggling these other complicated medical sort of, you know, things that are rushing through your body is an interesting thing to try to have to compartmentalize when you're an actor. And oh, that's happening now, you know. Let's get some questions. We've got a ton of questions in here for you. Do you think that male actors have the same kind of thought process regarding their hair and their careers?
No.
Yeah.
Although there is a funny anecdote about Henry Cavill when he was filming Superman, and he had a no mustache for Superman, and then he got hired for Mission Impossible and he had a mustache, and then they had to do reshoots for Superman, and they digitally moved his mustache. So it's just like some weird like digital stuff, but that's more a common thing. I think that wigs and like facial hair things are so much more easily changeable in like male actors.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a generalization, but like Johnny Depp can shave his head and they'll give him a toupee, or a giant wig to play Jack Sparrow, and then he takes it off and he's just
Mm-hmm.
well, whereas Charlize Theron, if she cuts her hair, that's a very specific character choice for the next 2 years. Yeah.
When you were working on the show, did you watch films of? I mean, obviously watched a lot of his films to get material and whatnot, but was there a conscious effort on your part to be imitating him, or not imitating, but being him? Or how did you decide which? Did you let the costume do the work, or?
Well,
I ask you this, get ready, because someone is asking for you to do a Depp impression, and I'm just going to leave that on your plate right now. And if you want to do that, that's fine. But I also wanted the question of, like, how did you go about that?
Yeah, I mean, I just generally have seen a lot of his interviews, so I do take tiny little things that he does anyway.
Aren't his interviews, like, isn't he just like so
weird? Just kind of.
He's just yeah, right. Just
like, and he listens, and yeah, my Johnny Depp's a little more bouncy, I think. He like is well, it's kind of Jack Sparrow, and it's not actually accurate at all. So it's just wine. And but I have a podcast that I'm working on right now that is called Depp Impact, and I'm watching all of Johnny Depp's filmography and just recording a podcast talking about his movies. So I've been slowly making my way through his filmography.
Do you find that in his films there's particularly the Pirates of the Caribbean films, is there that you can speak to large difference in sort of the performative qualities of those films? And can you do you find that after watching so much, you can point to it and go, oh yeah, this was a not great period in his life, or this was a super, does that at all come into your note taking?
Yeah. So he has a forgotten period, like between 2004 and Pirates of the Caribbean, which was, or no, not 2004, 1994 and 2001, which was Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl. And it's like all these really stupid, like, I have long hair and I'm dreamy. So like Chocolat and The Man Who Cried. There's some good ones in there, like Sleepy Hollow. But it's like largely flops. And then you get a Fear and Loathing every once in a while, and you're like, oh, he's having a lot of fun playing
Hunter Thompson,
who is just a wild individual. And then you get to Pirates of the Caribbean, and Disney was like, well, this guy is a loose cannon. I don't know if we can trust him to give a good performance because he's kind of a failure in the box office. And then you see his performances kind of like, those become his awards years, and Finding Neverland comes up out of that, and Pirates of the Caribbean and Sweeney Todd, and then the other Pirates movies where he's collecting a paycheck and he starts to just kind of show up and sleepwalk his way through the movies. And then Fantastic Beasts, where he's barely in it, but he collects the paycheck. And then the second Fantastic Beasts movie where he's terrible.
Do you think, oh gosh, we've got so many questions here.
They're all about
how does Late-Stage Capitalism fit into the show? Is it political? And does the show adapt to that aspect or current events?
Yeah, kind of. So Late-Stage Capitalism comes into it because Johnny Depp's career, like, we're kind of looking at it as his career is like, he is the personification of late-stage capitalism, where he started out as like a lovable weirdo, making Edward Scissorhands for no money, or getting sucked into a bed in Nightmare on Elm Street, and making these movies that like actually felt important, or like important to us for whatever reason. They just like hit a nerve. And then as he started making more and more money and getting more and more in debt, and trying to like spend more and do less work, or show up for Into the Woods and collect $35 million and get top billing for being in one scene, like his career starts to follow late stage capitalism and celebrity in the age of consumption. So he is that capitalistic thing because he just consumes so much. And the person who consumes the most is the best at capitalism. And if that's Johnny Depp right now, that's Johnny Depp right now. And we'll continue to throw money at him because, because
Sure. Well, did you like Edward Scissorhands?
I love Edward Scissorhands.
I do too.
I love Edward Scissorhands.
So
Ed Wood is my favorite Johnny Depp.
Yeah, me too.
Because I think it's
yeah. All right. Oh gosh, it's a quiz. What year was Depp's first film?
1984. Nightmare.
All right. Ding, 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 ding. Do you admire his acting?
Yeah, I do sometimes. Not in Pirates 5 because he just got $56 million to show up. But I think that Jack Sparrow is iconic and special and helped shape what I do a lot.
Mm-hmm.
A lot.
Yeah, I mean, you spent a lot of time with him, right? And have you ever reached out to him? Just out of curiosity?
Want him to sue us. Like, I want him to find out about us and sue us. I was really hoping we would go to the Paris Fringe because he lives in Paris, and that he would like find out about it through Vanessa Paradis or something, and be like, yo, you should sue them.
To be honest. All right. So so while we're on the subject of imitations, there is an audience, a lovely audience member who would insist on an a cappella Mercedes-Benz.
Oh my gosh.
Does that ring true? All right, well, just hold on to that. And whenever you feel like breaking into song, you just go for it, Jenna. I'm going to give you a little time to since all this is just being thrown at you in here. Let's go back. I have a question down here for, where are we? Oh, yes. I want to go to this. So Fishtown, okay, that you worked on with Tribe of Fools, right? This is a show that was nominated for Best Ensemble and Best New Play. And tell us about that show.
Yeah, so that show, it was a devised show, so the ensemble wrote it. And it's also, Tribe of Fools is a physical theater company. And so a lot of circus and physical theater stuff and kind of musical numbers are in it. But Fishtown was a hipster noir, was the subtitle. And it was that oh my gosh, let me see if I can remember the plot. That a virtual reality program and like tech company would give you a new life if you wanted it. Like you could escape into your dreams, but you had to pay the price of like selling all your personal information to these people, and they were using it to control the world. I think that's what it was. But yeah, so we trained for 4 months in physical theater and circus stuff, partner acrobatics and fights and dancing, and as well as creating a show around Peter Smith, who is the director and like lead artist on that. He came up with these characters and this idea of this world, and it's set in Fishtown, very Philly, and it was awesome.
I remember. Am I right in saying Caitlin Corkery?
Yes.
Wrote this, who, is a colleague over at WHYY. So I remember, talking to her. What do you think is your what is your goal as a performer?
Oh, my goal as a performer, I have so many. I'd say probably my main purpose maybe is just like, I think that there's ways to make people laugh while they're thinking about things, or like trick them into laughing about things, like that weird in between of comedy and tragedy that we all live in so frequently but don't like to talk about. Like that place is so interesting to me. One thing. It's to illuminate that like in between. I always call it the like the space between a giggle and a panic attack, kind of. That's like very baseline.
No, that, but, and I, the saucy maid work in Eugene Ionesco's Exit the King that you did for the IRC, I felt like that watching you work in that show, it felt very much like that. Of course, you know, costuming, Erica Holscher, which does our, you know, does our costumes and is actually technically helping us today on the show right now. I mean, that all helps to create that sort of, that razor edge of I've never heard it put that way. It's so great. Between a panic attack and a and a laugh, or, you know.
Because I think
Yeah.
that, like, we're always like, you got to be seen. You know, humans just have this need to be seen a certain way. Either I'm funny girl, or like I'm very serious actor. And I think there's something in between that's not quite.
Do you find that in New York, do you have a sense of your reception when you go into New York and you're you know, auditioning in New York versus, say, Philadelphia or other parts of the country? Do you feel like there's a city that gets you, and there's a, you know, like, these are like, oh gosh, right? I mean, granted, I guess a lot of the auditions that you're doing, you're not getting immediate feedback, but does that, do you have any kind of feeling about that, that like, I'm most comfortable when I'm either in this place or doing this kind of an audition?
Yeah, I always feel really confident going into, well, if it's a play with music, I feel extremely confident going into an audition. Because I'm like, okay, cool. There are a lot of actors who sing, but there's also not a lot of actors who sing. So like, that's a comfortable place to be. I also really like dirty theater. And that's kind of why I made Philadelphia my home. And why New York wasn't like the #1 place that I was going to go right after I graduated, because the theater that we put on a pedestal in New York is very shiny, and it's very,
yeah, define dirty a little bit.
polished. It changes every day, or even if it's hyper like polished performers who are doing really like strong, focused work, there's still like the edge in the performer that you go, oh, that's dirty, that's good.
So is that intrinsic to the performer then? That's sort of that edge, or is it the ability to be able to do that in this community, do you think? Like that it's more accepted?
Yeah, I think here, like, because Philly has, I don't think, you know, I think Philly has been in New York's shadow a lot, or whatever, for whatever reason, when really it's a completely different thing. But I think in Philadelphia, they like encourage things that aren't quite like Broadway.
Shiny?
Yeah, shiny. You know, we have shiny theater here, but like nobody goes. You know.
Well, yeah. I mean, I get what you're saying. I think I have another question. Is there anything you're afraid to do? I mean, like, is there anything that scares you about the stage, or about theater, or about film, or?
Not anymore. I used to be terrified of improvising. I would freeze up and didn't like, that's not, I just didn't want to make things up. I wanted a script. I wanted to be able to invent within those words and within those lines, but do not make me do improvisation. And then now that's also another part of Johnny Depp, was we made that show to force me to get better at improvisation, because it's so intrinsic to that show.
So what did you do to get better at it? Do you think just practice, or a control issue, do you think, or a?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that makes sense, right? That we all just, it's much easier if you know what's coming down the lane, right?
Yeah.
And so was it something you desired? Like, I know, like, did you think to get better as a performer, I need to let go?
Yeah, I need to conquer that. And that was a big problem in college too. I just couldn't let go. I like needed all the control, and I needed to be in complete control of my performance and of what I was doing, and why I was doing it. And this is what I need to hit. And this is my blocking. And this is this, and this. And I still have that in me, but like, improvising helped break down those walls so much more. And I just knew that like I would never be able to be fearless if I couldn't trust myself to make things up, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Do you surprise yourself often on stage? I mean, do you surprise yourself emotionally, like, oh, what was that, or is it just that you've opened up more and you have more access to different lanes?
I'll surprise myself emotionally often. I don't get cast in like super emotional parts that often anymore, because I think that like, this is kind of a not a pratfall, but like a hole that you can dig yourself into one community if you've been there for a while, where it's like, oh, you're funny, so just do funny stuff. But sometimes I do, like, I'll make myself laugh on stage, or like I'll catch myself feeling something and I'm like, oh, this is
What's that?
theater, yeah, like.
Ooh. All right, we have another question. Can we get a nutshell version of Depp's libel suit?
Yeah, so let me see if I can summarize it. So Johnny Depp is suing a British newspaper called The Sun for calling him a wife beater about Amber Heard. So it's a $35 million slander lawsuit, essentially. And because of that, Amber Heard and Winona Ryder and all these people are getting paraded into court right now. And there's a lot of video stuff that's not very kind to his case. And there's a lot of eyewitness reports that are not very kind to Amber Heard's case. So it's becoming much larger than the sum of parts. So that's kind of the big and small of it. Starting up again on Monday, but there's a lot of really gross details that are coming out.
Do you think it's hurting his career?
No. Like, he was still working even when the allegations were like not being questioned. And I think that that's also a that's the thing that comes along with in Hollywood.
Question here. Can you compare film acting to stage acting, sort of the process, getting cast, the marketplace? That's a lot of different aspects of it. But and I'll just add, do you find yourself particularly drawn to one or the other?
Yeah. I guess with film versus theater, film is a little less unforgiving about type. Like, they want you to know your type and they want you to fit into it before you can explore anything else. At least that's what I've experienced going into film auditions. Whereas theater is a little bit more fluid in things that you could potentially do, because you could do a musical and then a sassy maid and then a small boy, and then it doesn't really matter because it's not up and in your face. I mean, theater is where I feel at home, but over the past few months, years, I've been trying to focus more on a film career, because I think that it's just going to be around more now, especially. So I'm just trying to like restructure and refocus to film and voiceover stuff. And I think film is I like watching movies more than theater. But being in a theater with somebody it's just so.
Do you think about your life in a couple of years? Like, do you think about it in those terms? Like, gosh, sort of, because I know and one of the things I respect most about you is that you are a really hard, you go for it, and you work hard, and you get up there and you do it, and you're in New York, and you're up there and you're making it happen, which you have to do. But do you think about it in those terms? It's sort of like one foot in front of the other, and we'll just sort of like flow through this and see how it works and what comes my way, and I'll just keep trying these different things? Or do you really have something you're going for?
I kind of just throw things against a wall and see what sticks for the most part. That's like always been my way, because the chips kind of fall where they may in many ways. I think that more roles will become available for me in the next 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm in a tough position right now because I'm not an ingenue, or I do look like a teenager, but
Mm-hmm.
I sound like
right. Once you cascade into crazy secretary or whatever fun-loving person in the office, or maybe we won't have any offices. You'll be the fun-loving Zoom office partner. That person we have to have at the office meetings that really just makes them fun to be at. Let's see, we've got a couple more questions here. Boop, 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 boop. Let me see. We're still waiting on that a cappella version of Mercedes-Benz. Just saying. I can't go up any farther here. Well, I had a couple more for you. We've got just a couple of minutes here. Jenna, who do you look towards for feedback, or is that mostly like whether it's performative or internal? Is it your partner? Is it just a lot of self-reflection, or how and particularly during this time, just wonder, have you been doing a lot of thinking about that, or is it just too hard to think about?
I mean, I'm always thinking, which is neither here nor there. But yeah, my partner, Dan Scully, who has been a stand-up comedian and a writer and just a rock, he is excellent to bounce things off of, and he's a great cheerleader, and he's also a smart collaborator. So like if I have thoughts, or I have questions, or if I need help with something, he's a great team member. Otherwise, like Val is an excellent resource because she is honest and she has similar thought processes, but is also a completely different person than me. So she's been a great person to bounce things off of. I mean, I'm always looking for feedback. Anything I do, I'm like, if anybody has any feedback, that would be great. But yeah, those two have been pretty good. Otherwise, and I think this comes from like self-directing for so long that I'm pretty self-aware of things. Mm-hmm. Like if I feel something not going correctly, either in myself or around me, I'm pretty good at picking up the pieces and like trying to fix things myself.
So you can come off stage and kind of have a good bead on act 1, scene 3. I really have to, whatever.
Yeah, let's
sing
pick
louder. But you feel that, you think about that when you come off, and sort of, are you I always wonder, is that a part of your repertoire, is thinking about, and then does it change the next night, or is it just kind of one flow during a run and you realize that those things will come together at some point?
I tend to take immediate in the room feedback. So I can shift in the moment if I feel something's not working in the room. But for the most part, I'll ride through the performance and then either think about it afterwards, or if there's a note session or whatever, if it's just a run in a show, I'll take those notes and I'll consider them and apply them the next day and see what sticks. But I'm actually not a person who thinks too hard while I'm on stage. Like it's just never been, I think of acting as a coat where like you put it on, you walk on stage, you do the thing, and then you walk off stage and you're like, well, that was hot. Or like whatever. Or that was terrible. I'm going to take this coat off and I'm going to hang that one up and I'm going to try on a different one tomorrow. That's actually something I heard in college. One of my friends had said it and I was like, that's actually a really healthy way to look at that. So I'm not walking around bundled up and whatever. This character, this thought that like I didn't do it right. Same thing with auditions. Like I just walk into an audition, I do it and I leave and I can't think about it. Otherwise I drive myself insane. But yeah, I guess that answered your question.
It does. It does. Well, Jenna, it's getting up on the 6 o'clock hour, and probably time for everybody to have dinner. And I just want to thank you for your body of work in Philadelphia and New York, and for all that you've done for this community. I think you're a really bright spot and a unique voice in this community, both with your work and just I think the things that we have to learn about, that your life encompasses. And I am so delighted to be in this community with you. And I want to thank you so much for sharing your time. And to everybody who was in the audience and on Facebook, thanks for joining us. And I hope that you'll be back here 5 o'clock next week when Deborah Lee Scott, who is an author and an arts activist and the founder of Hidden River Arts, will be with us to talk about her work as an educator and as a writer, and really doing some great work here in the community. And until then, thank you again, Jenna, and I wish you all a very safe and a very strong week ahead. Thanks.
Thanks, Tina.
Bye, Jenna.
Bye.